Hey, wait, before we get into the episode, I want to share some exciting news with you. My new book comes out September 30th, and it's called Less Lost: Finding and Being Yourself in the Wilds of Ordinary Life. It's part memoir, part field guide to being yourself in a world that keeps asking you to be someone else. And in it, I share stories from yoga sessions, motorcycle rides, encounters in nature, and even a run-in with the Dalai Lama. And every chapter pairs a story with an embodied practice or tool you can actually use in your own life. Not to fix yourself or chase perfection, but to reclaim forgotten parts of who you are, stand in discomfort without disappearing, and belong to yourself without losing connection. Less Lost drops September 30th, and I can't wait for you to grab a copy for yourself and maybe one for a friend who could use the reminder you don't need to fix yourself. You just need to find your way back to being yourself. All right, now on to the show. Hey friend, welcome back to Hey Wait. If you've ever found yourself eating when you're not hungry, or avoiding food when you are, or tracking every bite like it determines your very worth, this might be because of the influence of your nervous system. After episode 3, when I interviewed Sarah Rusbatch on gray area drinking, which was one of the most listened to episodes I've done, a lot of you reached out to me and said, I learned so much in that episode, but I don't have a tricky relationship with alcohol, but I do with food. So can you talk about that? Well, I got to tell you, that's true for me too. I grew up as a competitive gymnast who was told how I could and couldn't eat. And I had a grandmother who always commented on my weight and a mom who constantly worried about hers. So I learned to relate to food with a lot of control and a lot of rules. And to this day, particularly when I'm stressed out, I reflexively count the number of nuts I'm eating, I cut carbs, and I reward and punish myself with food based on what I think I've earned. So, listener, I need this conversation just as much as you might. Which is why I am so grateful to have Stephanie Mara Fox here today. Stephanie is a somatic nutritional counselor and the creator of Somatic Eating. And she is one of the most compassionate, grounded voices I know on food, trauma, and body trust. And her work isn't about willpower or control. It's about safety and about how you can feel more regulated, more empowered, and more like yourself when you're relating to food. In this conversation, we talk about how food coping mechanisms are actually messages from your nervous system and why binging and withholding both come from the same unmet need. And Stephanie tells us the difference between somatic eating and intuitive eating, and how to begin to create a relationship with food that feels supportive, not shameful. This episode is a powerful hey wait to the ways you've been taught to mistrust your body, and an invitation to stop trying to fix your eating habits and to start trying to relate to them with understanding. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi, I am really excited to connect with you and be here today.
I was going to say the same thing. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because I have been geeking out about your work. You are really the only person I know that's out there talking about this connection between food and the nervous system and body and safety. And you have such an immense amount of expertise wrapped in empathy and experience. And so I'm like really excited to ask you a million questions.
Oh, well,
45 minutes worth of a million questions.
Go. No, I'm really excited just to dive into, my work, Somatic Eating, and it has been quite a journey. And, I find that also because nutritional science is an ongoing discovery, because we live in bodies that are constantly changing and have changing needs. In the conversation around food and our bodies, I feel like it's never ending, because we are always going to have to rediscover what works for our body now based on the context of our life and where the world is at. So I love these conversations because it just is kind of like, okay, where are we at now? And what's going to feel most supportive to us now? And that probably, if you interview me in another, I don't know, 5-10 years, it'll probably be something different.
That's really true, and a really interesting kind of frame to get into the conversation in, because right now I feel like there's a lot. Well, you talk in your work a lot about the distinction between control and safety. And I feel like, particularly in the world right now, there's a lack of safety, a feeling of that in the broader context. And if you've got stuff around food, I could see where this would be a time where that seeking safety would, the volume would be up on that. So let me actually start there, because I want to, like I said, I have so many questions for you. But where I want to start is, if you could like speak directly to the person listening, if they are someone who feels that they use food as a control mechanism, or are controlling about food, and you know better than me if that's the same thing or not, but what's possible for them when they get to the place where they have a safe relationship with food?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I find that the safety piece is not talked about enough. And I appreciate what you're bringing in, is that we also have to talk about it, like I was saying, in the context of the world right now, and that we are receiving a lot of messages externally that we are unsafe. Whether that's the environment, or, whether that's also the fact that GLP-1 era in this summer is just an explosion of body criticism and a lot of body fear and living in a body. And so we want to also just normalize, like, this is not on you that you potentially feel unsafe being in a body. I talk a lot about how that can also occur because of past trauma, and where our body gets stuck more in a sympathetic nervous system response. And so it kind of never really feels safe to come closer to our bodies. But even if you do the trauma work and work through some things from your past to update your body that it can feel safe to be here now, then you're coming just into the environment in the world that continues to maybe send you messages that, like, is it really safe to be in my body right now? So I do like to kind of bring in, when we're talking about safety, like, what even is that? And what I find what we're talking about when we talk about safety and food is that, one, food behaviors can increase when we are living more in a sympathetic response, because it can change our nervous system state we're functioning from. So when we aren't feeling safe, we are more in that sympathetic fight or flight response. And in that place, food cravings will increase. We will want to reach for very specific foods, things that are higher in simple carbohydrates and sugar. And I like to approach this from a place of not shaming or judging that. That is body wisdom. Rather than all these kind of other messages that we get of, like, you just need to control yourself, or why don't you have enough willpower, or, thinking that you're weak or something like that. It's actually really wise for the body to try to send you towards these specific foods, because it wants these quick hits of glucose to be able to fight or flee and have the energy to keep doing that.
Right, like there's an actual scientific reason here that this is what you're craving, not because you're just someone who's craving carbs.
Exactly. Yes. 100%. And so the other piece is like, oh, but when I eat those foods, but then I can't stop eating them. And of course not, because then when you start eating them, the body's like, one, it's getting what it needs nutritionally to continue to function. Stress depletes us on so many different ways. And so we need actually a lot more nutrition to be able to, make sure that our organs are functioning properly, and our body has enough energy to get through the day. And along with that if food behaviors are a response to past trauma, that it can affect the parts of our brain that we function from, where we're functioning more from the limbic amygdala part of our brain, where we're more reactive, where we're more in a fear response, rather than our prefrontal cortex, where we can do more rational, logical thought. So you bring in something that like gives you both, it makes you feel good momentarily, might even kind of like give you the energy to keep going in the sympathetic response, or give you a momentary reprieve where you're in more of the parasympathetic response just because of the way that that food makes you feel safe and calm in your body. And then you also, dopamine receptors can change when we've experienced past trauma. So then you eat something that makes you release more dopamine into your body. And so you're never going to want to stop eating that food, not because you lack willpower, because your body is getting what it needs to feel good and to feel like it's going to survive.
Right. I'm listening to you. I'm like, your body and your brain are, and your nervous system are checking boxes right now and being like, we're doing great. Like,
Yeah.
like you would be getting feedback that this is really good.
Yeah. Good job. You foraged. You found the berries, you got the sugar to make sure, and like fill in the blank for berries. Like you got the sugar to make sure we are going to continue to get through this experience right now. And so coming back to your question of like, when we actually start shifting the attention to what is this food behavior trying to do for you rather than to you, that it's doing something for you, for your survival. And when we start meeting that with curiosity rather than judgment and criticism, that's where we get to start to see, oh, my body is doing the best it can to keep myself alive. And what is making me live more in a sympathetic response so that I can actually address what's underneath that. And that when we start living more in a place of safety and connection in the parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes it feels like magic. It's not, but it's just, and I experienced this too from my own history, is that when you feel safer to be in your body or connect with your body, or even safer to connect with yourself when you are dysregulated, that the food behaviors don't really need to come in to help you feel safe. Because one, you either already feel that way, or you've updated your perception of being in a dysregulated state, that instead of thinking that you are in danger, you are just in discomfort. And when we update that it's like, wait, I'm going to survive this. I'm just uncomfortable right now. I'm not actually in danger. You also send that message to the body that, hey, we don't need to reach for all of these foods or restrict ourselves from these foods, because we're already safe here. We can get through this.
Right. What you're saying is, once your body feels safe and you've updated to this, like, this is just discomfort, this isn't lack of safety, you get a hey wait moment, right? You get the hey wait, I am actually okay here, and you get to make a different choice. Like, that's what this is all about. And I'm just wondering, I want to pause for a moment, because when you were giving just the example of how the nervous system, once you understand the role the nervous system is playing in food behaviors, it takes out the stigma. I found myself like softening, feeling empathy for myself. And I'm wondering if this was true for the listener too, right? Like, this is why I love nervous system work and understanding our behaviors, whether it's relationship to other people or relationship to food, through the lens of our body trying to keep us safe and alive. Like, if it's so liberating to take the stigma out of the behaviors. And I'm hoping the person listening is feeling the same way I am, which is right now I feel like I want to lean in and be like, okay, so now what? Like, now what do we do?
Yeah, exactly. And, I've experienced that with so many of the people that I've worked with. And I think there's this belief or this idea that we'll get to a place where we're never going to have a food concern or food craving or a food impulse ever again. And I do want to normalize that when it comes from, I work with people on all phases and stages of food recovery, a lot of the times with binge eating or restricting. But when we see that first, like these behaviors can decrease. Like I spent, I don't know, probably like a decade in the binge restrict cycle, and I don't have any impulse to do those behaviors anymore. It's not a coping mechanism or a strategy that my body knows that it doesn't need to lean on that anymore. But when I get stressed, do I still crave certain foods? Absolutely, because that is a natural response from my body. So I do like to update that we have to start to experience that whatever comes up for you around food, that it is body communication. And once we start understanding what our body is trying to communicate through wanting to eat a particular food or wanting to do a particular food behavior, then we get to kind of step back and say, oh, thank you so much for letting me know that actually what you really need is you really need to go for a walk. Like I've been cooped up outside, like inside all day. Oh, what you actually need is you need some co-regulation, and you're looking to that from food. Okay, can we go get a hug? Can we go call a friend? Can we get outside in nature? Like, so there's a lot of different things that these body and food behaviors can be communicating, but we have to first meet it with that curiosity to start to discover and not kind of always take it at face value of like, oh, just because I'm having this like means something about me. And then they get stuck in that shame spiral and cycle.
So you're talking about communicating with the body here. I would imagine that people are familiar with the idea of intuitive eating, or know a little bit about that. How is somatic eating different?
Yeah. So first, intuitive eating is just one modality out there. And I always like to normalize that every single food recovery modality that is out there is supportive and important and has helped tons and tons and tons of people. And if it helped you, fantastic.
Right.
What I noticed over the years, though, is that people kept coming to me saying that they tried intuitive eating and it didn't work for them. And then they felt like because that was the gold star, that that's what they should be moving towards in their relationship with food, they felt like a failure. Like, oh my gosh, I can't even make the thing that like helps people recover their relationship with food work for me. Am I just hopeless? So what I started to notice is that first with intuitive eating, it's more of a neurotypical approach rather than a neurodivergent. So if you're someone who maybe doesn't have a huge history of past trauma, maybe has like a little bit more of secure attachment online, also you
can trust your intuition. Sorry.
Yeah. Like, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
I agree with you that like if you have it, so I'll back up a second. If you have a history of trauma and also live with a neurodivergent brain, one, your experience of your body is different. You may have different sensory processing. You may have, one research shows that our prefrontal cortex after past trauma can actually shrink in size and diminish in its function. So already like one of the many parts of your brain where you intuit is in the prefrontal cortex. And so like, okay, so here you're trying to do intuitive eating with a body and a brain that is already struggling to do those things. Plus the fact that if we are living more in that sympathetic nervous system response because of past trauma, that's where also it is really hard to hear something like your hunger and your fullness cues. Because when we first go into a fight or flight response, initially appetite can decrease that's usually where restriction comes in, where it's like, I'm not feeling hungry anyway. So you're like skipping meals and you're like, whatever, I'm not feeling hunger anyways. But that's usually because why would you need to feel hungry if you're running away from a tiger? And then the longer that we stay in the sympathetic response, that's where the body starts getting depleted and it needs very specific foods to keep going. And that's where something like binging comes in, especially if there was already restricting, because also your body's starting to get like biologically scared of, am I going to get the nutrition I need to exist and to survive? And so then the binging comes in to both give you the food that you need to keep going and very specific foods to make sure that you have that glucose to continue to fight or flee. So intuitive eating is great, but just on a lot of different levels, it actually, while it's called intuitive, it is more of a mental approach to food recovery. It is not a body-based approach.
Right. It's like mindfulness that feels very full of mind as opposed to somatic practices that are in your body.
Yes, exactly. And so what I found is that in my work with somatic eating, we actually need to start with the groundwork of safety. And then we kind of need to maybe do some trauma healing and some nervous system regulation and some somatic work to even make it feel safer to be in contact with your body. And also start to learn, maybe for the first time, how do I even know what I'm feeling? Like, how do I describe that? How do I even know what hunger and fullness feels like in my unique system? And it might not feel like a belly sensation. It might be that it's more you stop thinking about food, or you suddenly have more mental clarity, or maybe, there's some people who get like aches and pains in different various parts of their body, and then those go away after they eat, and they're like, oh, I was hungry. So we have to learn like how your body talks to you around your unique body feedback. And then maybe something like intuitive eating might be able to occur, because as you grow in your window of tolerance and the nervous system can be rewired and the brain is plastic, thank goodness, and things can change and update and heal and evolve. And then you might be able to do something like the tenets of intuitive eating. But I find that with my work with somatic eating, we need to lay the groundwork first of being in touch and communication and connection with your body, which for many different reasons, it is legitimate why you have stayed away from your body.
Right. And this is making so much sense to me, because in my work with people, that's where we start as well, which is like, how in your body are you? Do you have language for being in your body, for the emotions, for the sensations? And that is a completely different realm. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, Stephanie, I'm getting so excited thinking about what this is like in terms of, because I don't talk with my clients about food very much, but I've talked with friends. And I know I have one friend who's like, she cannot tell when she's hungry, period. And that's fascinating to me, because she's someone who's very connected to her body, but that is a signal that she just doesn't get. Whereas for me, I'll say like, I'm hungry, and my husband will say, you're awake. Like, I'm always hungry. Like, that's what it feels like to me, So it's interesting, the different communication.
Yeah, and just to kind of riff off that for a second, there are reasons why, for example, like our relationship, I'll just say, our interactions with the cues of hunger or fullness, why we would want to stay away from those. For example, like hunger and feeling that can be an experience of like emptiness in the body that can sometimes remind us of an experience of loneliness, or when we've been abandoned, or when we didn't feel seen, heard, or held, or understood. And so sometimes staying away from the experience of hunger, where if you're someone who's like kind of nibbling, snacking, munching on things all day long, there's a reason for that. Or the experience of like, I know a lot of people will kind of cut their meals short, where where they don't quite get to satiation, because to actually feel satisfied in your body might feel so counterintuitive of what your life experiences of my needs aren't going to be met. Maybe you have felt really unsafe in the past, and that when we live more in the sympathetic response of that fight or flight response, we get accustomed to that. It becomes our new home in our body. And so to experience something like satiation from a meal might actually feel so triggering because it's more of a parasympathetic place to be, that you might not know. Right. I don't know how to be with this. I don't know how to sustain this. I don't even know how to be with the discomfort of feeling satisfied and safe and at home in my body, that we wisely will do things to stay away from the things that feel uncomfortable, even if that's something that leads to more safety. Because if what you know is the lack of safety and always feeling like you need to go, go, go and protect yourself, doing things that will lend itself to more safety will actually feel really threatening and uncomfortable initially at first. And I do like to normalize that. Like when we talk about like, okay, so we need to build more safety in the body so that like these food behaviors get to decrease, but it's not going to feel safe at first.
Exactly. 100%. And that's why I love, learning more about your work. I love the kind of questions that you ask people to consider around food, because they are so exploratory of this, like, hey, what is this particular flavor of discomfort that you have right now? Could you give some of the examples of questions that you give people to consider in certain situations?
Yeah. So when it comes to the conversation around food, I find that first we just need to meet it with a lot of curiosity. And let's say, for example, someone is in patterns of binge eating. And a lot of the times there can be a lot of judgment around that. And so what I would first guide someone is kind of getting curious about, for a lot of people, there's usually a specific time of day that they're binging, and this can be a pattern that is happening regularly. And so I would kind of want to back that up and be like, okay, what memories do you have around that time of day growing up? And, how are you feeling usually by the time that you get to that point in the day? And, what are things that potentially have gone unnoticed, unnamed, unfelt, unseen by the time you get to that point in the day? So we get to first see that, like, one, there can be somatic memories that come up at certain times of the day that when we, especially for like nighttime, if some maybe family trauma happens a lot at night where there's fighting at the table, or just the environment didn't feel safe and it happened in the evening hours a lot of the time. For a lot of kids, what they learn is like, okay, I can sneak into the kitchen, I can grab a bunch of food, and then I can go sneak into my bedroom and like create this little cocoon for myself with this food. And we do that over and over and over again, and our body remembers that. And so the evening hours,
right, and it's not conscious. We're not thinking about this.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you get out of the environment and you think, well, I'm not in that environment anymore, but your body may still be in that environment as of what we know about trauma. And so, you get to the evenings every night and suddenly there's like this switch that goes off inside of you of like, I have to go eat a bunch of food. And you're not really sure why. And at that point, I find that a saying that I have is embody first, examine later. And that we try to first understand it and make sense of it.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
even as even as I was saying, like, oh, you could journal about these things or write about these things, like do it away from the food behavior. Don't try to understand it in the moment, because you're already not in your prefrontal cortex and you're already in parts of your body and your nervous system where you're not going to be able to rationalize or think through, why am I having this binge urge right now? So sometimes it has to be like, okay, this is really intense, and can I like match this intensity and show up for it? I find we're always trying to like calm ourselves down. Like even sometimes in nervous system work, it's always like, how do we calm this down? But sometimes we actually need to meet it and match it. And that might be with movement and screaming and vocalization and pushing against a wall and running and lifting weights. And I don't know, whatever speaks to anyone. But sometimes we actually have to be like, this energy is so big in my body. Like a binge urge is so big. How can I actually meet that and say, I see you, body? We are experiencing something really big right now, and I want to ride this big wave with you.
I love that because I feel that in my body. It's the same thing of like trying to get someone to go from parasympathetic 70 miles an hour to sitting on a meditation cushion. Like,
yeah,
that it feels punishing. It doesn't feel aligned. I used to sometimes, before I would practice yoga in the morning, I lived in a place once that had a punching bag. And on mornings where I woke up anxious and high rev, I would go punch the punching bag and then I would go do yoga because then I could actually it's like meet yourself in that energy. And it feels very true for the energy in your body around certain food behaviors to try and put it to change the channels into something that's actually calm and grounded. That might be way too big of an ask.
Yeah, completely agree with you. If we see that going into kind of the idea of body impulses in somatic work, that it's like there's an impulse to reach for food and bring it towards yourself. And so sometimes in a body sense, I'm like, what else have you been wanting to reach out for and pull towards yourself? And that has been unavailable. So let's say, for example, a lot of what I teach in my work, Somatic Eating, is how sometimes food can become a replacement for secure attachment. And so if you kept reaching out for a parent and they weren't there to meet you in that, you had to find some way to reach out and bring something towards yourself. And if we see that something like hyper-palatable foods that get such a bad rap that they taste the same every time, and you can have kind of the same body experience with it every time, it becomes the reliable, consistent entity in your life that can replace the same experience that you're looking for from a parent. And so there's wisdom to this. We really have to.
Wow, I'm just like I'm like, that's McDonald's, right? Like that's all the fast food. That's the like. That piece that you said about it always tastes the same, like they're chemically engineered foods to taste the same, and they will meet you the same way every time. Oh my God, it just makes me want to cry. And it brings up for me that you do parts work with people around food too, don't you?
Yeah, I do blend. I like to blend that in as well, because I find that that's important. That yes, I always kind of get curious about like, okay, do we want to talk with the body and the nervous system in a particular moment, or do we want to talk with a younger part of you? And there's no right way. I think it just depends upon the moment and the person and the conversation that we're in. But it is another resource to start to get curious about like, oh, even who is reaching for this food right now? And it's like, oh, this is my inner child that's looking for secure attachment and wants to feel grounded and held and contained. And this food is trying to do that for me.
That is so powerful. This is why I'm so geeked out on your work. People who know my work, I'm like, this is it, but it's with food. This is amazing. It makes so much sense. And it's kind of blowing my mind. Stephanie, usually by this point, I would have asked you more about your story. You're giving so many great examples, but would you be open to going back a little bit and telling us how you came to be doing this? Because this is really unique work.
Sure. Yeah. As most people who get into relationship with food, I find that most people have their own history in navigating hardships with food and body. And that was certainly the case for myself I usually like to kind of explain that my body started yelling at me in my early 20s with digestive issues. And that was just when I could start listening. unfortunately. I couldn't hear it before that. But digestive pain really woke me up and being like, oh,
It'll do
okay,
that.
like what is going on here?
This ain't
And
working.
so, yeah. And so, there is a history in my family of digestive diseases. And so actually in my early 20s, ended up getting a colonoscopy and endoscopy done to make sure there wasn't anything going on in there, looked fine. And they basically diagnosed me with irritable bowel syndrome and kind of sent me on my way and just told me to watch out for my stressors. And as the very curious person that I am, I was like, huh? I was like, this isn't how I'm going to live the rest of my life with this. And, that I think launched me through a lot of different explorations and modalities where, as for many people, it started with yoga. And I just have such a love for yoga. And now, being on my mat for like 20 years and being able to connect with my body and feel at home in like the four walls of my yoga mat. Like every time it's just when the world feels loud, I know I could even just like sit on my mat and be like, okay, I know this. I know this place. I've been here so many times and I can create safety for myself here. But learning about the mind-body connection through yoga, and then started learning about Ayurveda, the nutritional sister science of yoga. And that got me really interested in nutrition. And so just kind of started to explore. First, it started for me with focusing on the nutritional piece of what is my body trying to say, and, started doing some certifications around nutrition and like learning more about like, how do I feed this body? Because at that point in time, my whole lens of food was dieting. So I went on my first diet when I was 13 years old, Weight Watchers, and it didn't teach me how to be an eater. It taught me how not to eat. And so, that broke my relationship with my body and food so young that I saw my body as something that I needed to control and was the enemy, and that I couldn't trust it. It wasn't wise. I needed to tell it what it needed. And that's what started in my teenage years, like the kind of relationship that I would have with my body for a long time. And what started that was I was pretty uncomfortable in the way that my body looked. But of course, this is now hindsight of understanding this now. At the time, my parents were getting a divorce at 13, and there was already a lot of different things that were going on at home that was being processed as traumatic in my own body. And it was all those experiences that kept me in a sympathetic response. And I find that many people are drawn to dieting and diet culture because if we see that there are some overlaps between trauma and dieting, it takes away your sense of choice. You don't feel like you're free to trust yourself. It makes the external world feel very scary and that you have to constantly be looking out for yourself. It takes away your sense of autonomy. So there's like, there's something about this dieting thing that really feels like home to me. I know this. I know what this feels like. Yeah. And we go towards what feels familiar because that can feel, even if it's just momentary and short term, it does produce a sense of safety because we know it. We know what to expect. So I think there was something that was already happening inside of my body, why dieting felt kind of at home for me and felt comfortable. And it wasn't, as I said, like much later where it was constantly like undernourishing my body, over exercising, then getting stuck in the binge restrict cycle, that my digestive tract was like, it was shut down. I mean, it was just not functioning because I was not nourishing it properly and living in the sympathetic nervous system where digestion shuts down and our blood moves away from our digestive tract towards our limbs to fight or flee. And I was always in that state. So like, I get it now. I'm like, oh, body, I get it. Like, what you were trying to tell me. And so from there, after doing, I became a yoga teacher and studied meditation and, really dove deep into the mind-body connection and like started studying nutrition as well. Then I had one day a friend tell me about somatics. And somatics was really not known at the time. I mean, I get that it's gotten super popular now and is becoming more and more of a buzzword, but
Starting to, yeah.
yeah, but like now I just it was so profound for me back then to learn about this field of psychology. And I had always known that I wanted to go to graduate school, but I wasn't sure for what. And when I found somatics, I was like this is it. And so I went on to get my master's degree in somatic psychotherapy, and then have, my published thesis at the time was how to cultivate a relationship with the gut brain. And that kind of started this work in, like, I think over, almost like 2 decades now of like integrating, trauma and somatics and nutrition. Kind of the field for me of somatic eating and what I'm creating got birthed and born. And now I'm doing my PhD in somatic psychology to kind of do some more research on this now. But it's been a long time in the making, and it's exciting to get to hear, because I feel like this work is speaking to a lot of people, and it also is what I wish my younger self knew and what I could explain to her now, that it's like, you make sense. Like, you're not weak, and like,
Yes.
this isn't the problem of what you're doing with food. It makes sense that you're doing this. And I just want more people to be able to experience what I wished I could have known and that I understand now.
Your work is so important. And like when we first met, and I was like, why aren't more people talking about, how, because this affects so many people. So many people have a lack of trust in their relationship with their body, particularly around food. And food is so tricky because you need it. You need to eat multiple times a day in order to survive. And so to me, this is so central to so many lives. And like you said, to just be told you're not broken, everything you're doing makes total sense. You just have been training in the wrong ways. We can help you train in the healthy ways.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of blowing up everything that you thought you knew, or what you were taught, or perspectives you've taken on around why you're doing what you're doing with food, and saying, okay, let me just pause. I don't have to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, but even if someone just first starts with, I'm doing this for a reason, and it's out of safety and protection, and I will slowly discover what that's trying to protect me from. But I think taking the pressure off of having to understand it now, but just starting to shift the perspective of, this is doing something for me, even if I don't logically get it, because it's not logical. It doesn't have to be. When we are in a survival response, we will do anything, even if it doesn't make sense, to do what we think we need to do to survive. And that's a lot of what restricting or binge eating is doing for our body, is it's just in a survival state, and we're doing what our body thinks it needs to do to make sure it stays alive. And like you were just naming, of, it is so hard to be in a body and be in relationship with food. Like, we try to make it sound like this very simple thing, that it's like, you should just know how to do that. Like, babies know how to do it. You should just know how to eat. And it actually is like, it's not that simple. And there are so many things that go into why we eat, what we eat, when we eat. And I just want anyone who's listening to this to bring in so much compassion, that if you've been struggling, that it's not that simple and it's not that easy, but it can become more comfortable as you get to know yourself and your own body, of how to navigate your relationship with food ongoing, because we're going to be in relationship with food our entire lives.
100%. This is everything you just said applies to the work that I do with people in relationships. It's like, people think, well, how can I not know how to relate? Like, I've been relating with everyone in my life, literally every day of my life. And it's the same thing. It's like, you've been relating out of conscious survival tactics, and we can change those to healthier, and it's going to take maintenance for the rest of your life. Like this is, it isn't just as simple. It's simple, but it's not easy. It takes attentiveness. It takes being in your body. And that's why I love that the foundation of your work is, what did you say earlier? Like, don't try and figure it out. Embodiment first. Just get back here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my question, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, my question is then, if the person listening right now is like, okay, I am completely resonating with this. This feels really true for me. Mm-hmm. Where do they start? I heard you just say, essentially, you start from the place of like changing channels in your mind to just be curious about how this could be related to survival. But what would you say are like, here are the 3 small ways that you can start building more trust around your body and food?
Yeah. So first, anytime I give kind of a blanket suggestion, I want to normalize that you are a unique person, and what works for every single person is going to be unique to you. And so sometimes we have to work together, come check out my programs and things to kind of like dive deeper into what is going to uniquely meet you. But what I first find is that often when I ask the question, how often do you check in with yourself throughout the day? Usually it's very minimally. Even sometimes like 0. Like, what are you talking about even checking in with myself throughout a day? What does that even mean? And so sometimes we have to first start there, because food can sometimes be a way to get our attention. A lot of the times people talk about food behaviors in the way of it like numbing us out to pain or overwhelm or stress or grief. But food is also a way to embody. It is a rich sensory experience. And so if we haven't been in touch with our bodies all day, sometimes eating food can be a way to slow down and get in touch with ourselves in a way that sometimes is appropriate, or we've deemed allowed, or is a safer way to get in touch with ourselves. So I find that, again, if the initial work, I think a lot of people are surprised that it's not actually with food. Like, we think it's just like, but I have this food behavior. Like, shouldn't I be focusing on the food? But that is one, it's body communication. So we have to see, what is it trying to communicate? And 2, if we go towards the thing that feels the most overwhelming to attend to at first, that's just going to push you more outside of what's called your window of tolerance. And you might not be able to then make any forward progress because you're just constantly overwhelmed, and then going and leading on your food coping mechanism to get yourself back into what you can tolerate again. Yeah. So I find that it's first, can we start with little somatic pauses throughout the day? And I call them specifically somatic pauses because we're not necessarily checking in with the mind as much, but more the body. So how do I feel right now? How's my breath? Are there any sensations that are present? And even in that check-in, even those questions might feel like too much for some people to check in with how you're feeling. Because to name, I'm feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and then not knowing how you can move through that or be with that might feel like too much. So even in the check-in, we might first start with externally picking up, what's my experience of my environment right now? Oh, there's a tree outside my window and the leaves are blowing in the wind. And how does my body respond to that? Or, oh, I'm going to go pet my fur friend, if you have a fur baby in your house. And what's it like to kind of like just touch them and notice your body's response? So I find that a lot of, in the somatic work, I think a lot of practitioners are trained in the way to go straight into the most overwhelming thing, because it's like, okay, we got to get you comfortable with this discomfort. But if we don't first have the capacity to like even be with ourselves in a neutral or good experience, how are we going to have the capacity to be with ourselves in something that feels more intense? So I find that that's one first step. And then if we want to come into relationship with our body itself, I find not going straight towards the places that feel the most overwhelming to go to, because if we keep doing that, there's an association that gets created of the only time I check in with myself is when I feel discomfort. So why would I want to check in with myself? So we also have to kind of do some somatic updating.
Point.
That like, I'm also going to check in with myself when I feel neutral. And that can be specifically like, what does the tip of my nose feel like right now? What's my experience of paying attention to my earlobes? If I was going to touch my fingertips, what do my fingertips feel like right now? So I like to go towards more the periphery because we often have less stories or less overwhelming experiences of that. I know for a lot of individuals who are struggling in relationship with like their food or their body image, we don't want to go towards your belly right away or your chest or your shoulders. You know, like there's going to be a lot of sensation there. And we want to first kind of start attending to something that feels neutral or even good. So those are two kind of places where it's like little somatic pauses throughout the day to start checking in with yourself, noticing how you're experiencing your environment. And then also if you want to start coming into relationship with your body and getting to know, well, what does my body feel like? Specifically choosing a body part that feels neutral or okay to attend to so that you're also updating it is safe to connect with myself. Then we can slowly go towards the things that maybe feel more discomfort or more sensation, but we have to first start there.
Right. You have to build the trust that your body is a safe place to be and that it isn't, like you said, if you're going to connect, it isn't all pain. It isn't all discomfort. Because of course, if that's what you're practicing, why would you want to keep doing that? You know, like makes so much sense. That is so helpful. And, you know, the people who listen to this podcast have been aware of somatics for a while, most of them. And this is, I know this is going to make sense to the listener. And I just want to say, like, you have so many great little practices and inquiries in on your social media. So would you mind telling people about where to find you and also about any of you mentioned having a course?
Yeah, absolutely. There is one thought I just want to add in before I name that, just to further support those who are listening. In how does that connect back with food, like these somatic pauses and these neutral check-ins, is that there is some cool research I've been reading around how when we enter into a meal in more of the sympathetic nervous system, it increases the likelihood that we will overeat at the end of that meal. So when we are already in a fight or flight response, it can shift and change how much we eat. And that, again, just to bring in that compassion of like, it's not always about the food. Sometimes it's about the state that you're eating the food in. And that if you can kind of slow down and take a pause before you eat and take in your environment and show your body that it's not in danger and check in with a neutral body part and maybe start a meal more from that parasympathetic place, it might shift your experience of that meal. So I just wanted to connect that back with food for a second.
So good. And it's making me realize, like, I often will take my lunch outside if I can. And like, if the weather will allow for it, I will always go outside, because if I'm taking a break in the middle of my day, it's likely that I'm a little parasympathetic, a little revved up. If I just go sit next to a tree and watch the movement of the tree, I'm a lot less likely to keep feeling hungry at the end of my meal. I know it, like I can feel it in my own experience. So really good point. Thank you for adding that.
Yeah. So where people can find me, first, I have two different websites. One is stephaniemera.com. So that's where you can learn more about working with me one-on-one. You can find my podcast, which I also have, called Satiated. You can find all my social media links. So I'm on every social media platform. You know, I know most people are on Instagram, so you can find me there at _Stephanie Mera. I'm on TikTok at Stephanie Mera Fox. And so, you know, you can find all those links there. And then my second website is somaticeating.com. And that's where you can find information about my 3-month live program. So I teach that twice a year and it's live. I want to connect with people. There is nothing pre-recorded. Like, that is why I am in this work, is I want to connect with people in person, well, virtually in person. But, you know, this is an opportunity to do this work in community, because I know so many people feel so isolated and so alone in their food interactions. And so if you're looking more for a community-based feel where all classes are live and there's space and time in every class for connection and conversation and getting curious about what's coming up for you. And also, I always offer little bite-sized explorations at the end of every class to kind of start to attend to, and journaling assignments and all the good things. And then there's also like somatic community meals. So we also eat together to practice what you're learning, like actually in relationship with food. So the next class is going to be at the end of October. And so doors will open to that probably sometime in September. And anyone can go to somaticeating.com right now and sign up for the waitlist for that. I will, fingers crossed, also be coming out with a somatic eating coach certification training probably in January 2026. That's the goal. But there will be more information at somaticeating.com coming up about that. And you can join my newsletter and just keep in touch. And, you know, even when anyone signs up for my newsletter at stephaniemera.com, you'll get kind of a 5-email series kind of walking you through some of these things to start to practice the pausing and kind of moving through curiosity with your food behaviors in just a new somatic way.
Right, which is like you're offering all these ways for accompaniment in this relationship that can be mostly unconscious, and if it is conscious, can feel really lonely or shameful. And I just love the resources you have that feels like there's a real sense of offering people, I'm in this with you, I got you. So I really hope that the listener goes and checks out whatever resonates with them. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody at the end, which is, back to you, do you have a practice or a ritual that you do? And, you know, you've been talking about food. I talk about relating with people. So whatever practice that you have that helps you stay with yourself, whether it's when you're around food or when you're around someone else, is there something that you use personally?
Yeah, absolutely. I know the fawn response very well. And so for anyone who maybe doesn't know the fawning response, is kind of what we would know as people pleasing. But really, we see it as a trauma response of, if everyone else is safe and okay, then I get to be safe. And so I very much know what it's like to kind of abandon myself because of my history. I don't do it anymore. But, you know, I know that fawn response of like, okay, I just have to make sure everyone else is okay, then I get to be okay. So I think there was a lot that I needed to learn around how to stay connected to myself when I'm in relationship with something else. And I do actually call something food fawning, where this can happen with food as well, that when we are in environments that involve food, but we don't feel safe to speak up for ourselves, we may find ourselves overeating because everyone else is still eating, or we may find ourselves overnourishing our body when we're complete because someone else wants us to eat a particular food and we don't feel like we can say no, or we go to a restaurant that we know like there's nothing there that would actually work for our body and resonate with our body, but we say yes anyway because we want everyone else to feel comfortable. So there's a lot of different ways this can also show up with food. But what I found, and I learned the term oscillation when I was in graduate school, as somatic experiencing has become more and more popular and the terms related to that has become more popular, the term pendulation has become more of the popularized term, but I learned it as oscillation. But if you think of it like a figure eight, and it's kind of like, okay, I check in with myself when I'm in relationship with someone else, and it's like a quick scan. I'm like, where's my breath? Am I breathing? Where are my shoulders at? How am I doing right now? And I just will like quickly like notice and name what's happening for me. And then I kind of meet it with, of course. Oh, of course. Of course I'm not breathing fully. Like, yeah, this is a new
Yep.
environment. Oh, of course I'm like feeling the impulse to do whatever. Like, yeah, like look at what's coming up inside of me right now. So I really validate the experience that I'm having to kind of decrease any judgment around whatever reaction my body is having.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the figure eight, then we bring the attention outside of ourselves to the other person, to connect, to pay attention, to experience the moment with that person, and then we bring the attention back inside. And so I found that this was a practice I needed to do for probably several years to get really integrated
Yeah.
with it, but I do the same with food. So when I'm eating a meal, let's say I really want to eat the meal while I'm watching a movie. Like, there's all this shame around, like, no, you got to sit at a table and, like, not do anything else. It's like, you know what? Sometimes watching a movie and, like, eating dinner is really satisfying. But it does kind of take us a little bit out of our bodies because we're paying so much attention to something else. So I find that even if I am doing something else, like watching a TV show or watching a movie while I'm eating, that I will continue to practice that, where I will pause every now and then, take that figure eight inside of myself. How am I
Yeah.
doing? What am I enjoying about this food? Do I like what I'm eating? Does it need anything? Did I not put enough salt on this? Like just little
Right.
check-ins. And then I will bring my attention back out to what I'm watching and enjoying that and enjoying watching that while eating food. And I find that that supports me in having a much more nourishing, grounding, safety producing relationship and interaction with food, because I didn't just eat a whole meal completely disembodied. I was
Because
still
you're actually
checking in
there.
with, yeah, I'm actually there and I'm actually experiencing
You're
the
actually
food
in a
along with,
relationship.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I love that. Kind of makes me want to go back to the very beginning and do a whole episode on food fawning and fawning. Like this, you're talking my language. That
Yeah.
really resonates with me.
Oh,
I
I'd
am
be
a
happy to
fawner.
come back and
That's
talk
my
about food
default.
fawning for a whole
I
nother
will
hour.
have you back. I will have you back because I think this is going to really resonate with a lot of people. So thank you so very, very much, Stephanie, for being here. And listener, I'm imagining you got a lot from this. You might want to listen to it again. I know you know somebody who needs to hear this, so please send it to them. And it's funny, as we're coming to an end here, it's right before lunchtime for me. I'm noticing my stomach is almost crampy. I'm hungry. I'm like leaning towards, ooh, what am I going to eat? So whatever time of day it is where you are right now, let's just all take one moment together to like wiggle our toes, wiggle our fingers,
Mm-hmm.
give a little shake, because this is a transition point, and see what it is that you are taking away with you from this that you want to practice. She gave you a lot of great things to practice. I know for sure I want to just really come back to that curiosity, to the, how is this behavior I'm doing right now? How is this way I'm thinking about this meal or this food potentially related to my nervous system seeking safety? That's really a great question. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for the listener. And I'm going to say what I always say at the end, which is, hey, wait, your insights matter. And the right people will meet you there. So stay with yourself. And I will see you next week.